Welcome to our channel, Two Teas in a Pod. I'm Teresa.
I'm Tabby.
Started up a new YouTube channel. A lot of people thought that me and Tabby think alike, so we thought, hey, why not? Let's put a video together.
Yeah.
So we are a mother-daughter team, and guess who's the daughter?
I am.
Don't let her lie.
Nobody ever guesses that though.
But anyways, we're mother and daughter, and we live in Kentucky, as you can tell by our accents. But we thought that we would bring out a video basically talking about mystery, murder, mayhem, unsolved cases, cases that are solved, and weird stuff, and just go on from there.
Yeah.
We thought about doing it from each state, or a case from each state, and why not start with where we're from, and that's Kentucky.
Yep.
So, anyways.
The first case we're going to talk about is Betty Gail Brown. This case was back in 1961. It is still unsolved, but it did happen here in Kentucky.
So, anyway, like she said, it's still unsolved. So, feel free to leave your thoughts and comments, and of course, subscribe. So, anyways, this case happened in October of 1961. It was October 26th. We'll get into it. Do you want me to start it out? Or you?
I'll start a little.
Okay.
Okay. So, Betty Gail Brown. Our first case is about Betty Gail Brown. She was 19 years old. She lived with her parents, Hargis Brown and Quincy Brown. She was the only child. She went to Lafayette High School. She graduated with honors. She was a well-liked student. Nobody really had anything bad to say about her.
Betty Gail Brown, when she graduated from high school at Lafayette High School, she went to Transylvania University. She didn't stay in the dormitory there because she was only 15 minutes away from home. So there was no point in spending money.
Extra.
So she still stayed at her mom and dad's house, and she would drive to school. She ended up joining a sorority there at the Transylvania University. And she was really big in her church too. She was a youth leader, and she was in the choir, and so she was well liked. She had lots of friends, and she did date a lot. She had several boyfriends. She didn't really have anybody steady, but she did go out on several dates, and
Like usually people do when they're in college.
right. So she was enjoying the whole college life, and she was in her second year of college when things went bad.
It started out like a normal day. She went to school. She had some big exam to study for. She studied that day. She came home, and her parents were there, and they ate dinner together. They talked about, Betty Gail Brown had talked about a movie that they would probably be interested in, so she suggested it to them that they should go see it. They don't really get out and do those type of things, so they decided to go and watch the movie. But before that, they were eating dinner together. They were having normal conversation. Everything was okay. Betty Gail said that she was going to go back to Transylvania to study more because she had that big exam, and that she would be back around 10:30 or 11 or so. So
Earlier that day, I forgot to mention too, earlier that day when she drove to school, on that day, her car was in the shop.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that. But her car was in the shop that day, and because there was something going on with the air conditioning, so she drove Dad's car to school for her normal school day. But then when she come home, the car was fixed. So when she mentioned about going to study with her friends for this big exam, the next day, she was able to drive her car
Right.
up there, which was I can't remember what year, but it was a Simca. It's a little foreign car. But she ended up driving that to the school.
Mhm.
Her parents went ahead and left to go to the movie. So when they left, she ended up leaving as well. So when she left, she went to Foyer Hall, which she parked. Foyer Hall, let's see, there was a driveway that a lot of students parked at there for Foyer Hall that's across from Broadway.
Right.
So she parked over there and she walked across Broadway and went into Foyer Hall and then studied with a group of friends there. It got to be around, I don't know, 10:30ish or so, and they took a break. And when they took a break, she went and looked for the house mother to see if she can stay late.
Right.
So whenever she got permission to be able to stay past the visiting hours, and she was able to stay till midnight to do some studying. So that's what she did.
Yeah. So the house mother remembers letting her out at midnight. So she let Betty Gail out. Betty Gail went to her car, and she was gonna head home. In the parking lot, was it in the parking lot? So in the parking lot, there had been a friend of hers that had drove by, and he noticed that Betty Gail Brown was in her car, or getting into her car.
Yeah.
Or walking out of Foyer Hall. And he stops and he's talking to her and seeing what she's doing, and she is studying for this big exam.
He was actually in his car too.
Right.
So he kind of like pulled up next to hers, and they said that she scooted over to the passenger side, rolled down her window, and they were talking through the window. So.
Right. So they were talking just for a little bit, and then the friend, what was his name? Charles Risden, he remembers pulling out and driving home. He saw Betty Gail Brown following him, and it looked like that she was heading home, so he didn't think anything of it. And then she turned off into...
Well, he turned off into the parking lot.
I don't know anything about this.
So he turned off into the men's dormitory there, and she went on, and then he said that she went to a stoplight and then turned in the direction, I think it was
of her house.
South Upper Street. She was going south towards her address, which was Lackawanna Road.
Right.
So it appears to him that she was on her way home, which
Right.
was only 15 minutes away.
Right.
So her mom and dad went to go see the movie, and they got home before Betty Gail Brown got home. And the father wasn't feeling real well, so I think he had a headache or something, so he wanted to go on into bed. And she said that she just wanted to stay up
And wait for Betty Gail Brown.
her to get home. Well, it got to about 11. She started getting a little worried because she said that her daughter would be home about between 10:30 and 11.
And they usually were really close, so like if something was to happen, she would tell her like, I'll be home. She was going to be home at a certain time, and that's typically what she did, so that's why she was a little bit worried on where she was.
So she was starting to get a little bit nervous, but she decided to hold off, and she knew that they closed down about 11, I think, 10 or 11, but she thought, well, I'll just wait for a little bit. Well, then it got to be midnight. Still no word coming, about where she's at or anything. So she starts getting nervous. So she decides to go look for Betty Gail Brown. So she's still in her pajamas and all that. She throws on a coat. She goes out and she drives around to the path that she would go, and she drove around the Transylvania University looking for her daughter.
Right. And she didn't find her. She kept driving, so then she went back home. She went back home and she tried to wake her husband up and was like, hey, Betty Gail's not home yet. I'm starting to get really worried. And I don't think he was too concerned because he was like, oh, it's only a little bit after midnight. She'll be home, or just give her a little bit more time.
She probably went out to eat with friends or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. So then
She goes out
the mom, Quincy, she goes out again.
on a different path.
Correct. And she's trying to look for her daughter. She, again, still cannot find her. She goes to Transylvania.
Yeah.
She just continues to drive a different route to see if she maybe went a different way. But again, still did not find her anywhere. So she goes back home. At this point, she's really worried and doesn't know like what happened or where she went. So she wakes him up for sure, doesn't she?
So she wakes him up again and is like, look, she's not home. It's like, at this time, I think it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. No, it was about 1 or 2 o'clock
Like
in the morning.
12:45, 1-ish.
So she's like, okay, look, she's not home. He's still like, oh, she's just out with her friends or whatever. We'll call the police, see if there's been any accidents. We'll call the hospitals or whatever. So they start doing all that. Well, and calling friends too, I think. And I think at that time she did call the house mother as well.
Right, yeah.
So she calls the house mother and she was like, oh no, she left at midnight. You know, she got permission, left at midnight. And so, but no, she was gone. And then, so now the mother, it's getting to be about 2 o'clock in the morning. So, okay, the father's finally getting nervous. So he calls the police and reports her missing. So they put on a all points bulletin out to look for Betty Gail Brown in her Simca and to go look for her. So they're on their way to look around Transylvania University to see if they can find her.
Right.
And at that time
Was when she was...
the mother actually goes and searches for her a third time.
Okay. And you said, and at that time, the mom, Quincy, actually they go out again to search for her for a third time. They're driving around. It was her and her husband, wasn't it? Or
It was just her.
Oh, it was just her. They're driving around. At that time, Quincy goes and looks for her daughter again for the third time. She is driving around still like she did before, still did not see her or nothing.
And
No, you go ahead.
At this time, Donald Ducksworth.
Yeah.
Donald Duck.
Donald Duck.
Donald Ducksworth actually got the call too. He was close to Transylvania University, so he's up there looking too. Well, while Betty Gail Brown's mom, Quincy was looking for her daughter, he actually pulls up into the driveway for Morrison Hall, and he spots a car that was similar to Betty Gail Brown's car.
Yep. When he went up to the car, he realized that there was a female sitting there. She had a bra wrapped around her neck. Her head was facing the ceiling. She was looking up. The doors had been locked, except for the passenger side door. At that moment, he was like, yeah, I need to call backup, and I need to get other detectives in here and other people. That way they can see what's going on. At that moment, after they had sent out that, what's it called?
All points.
Yeah. He was like, this has got to be Betty Gail Brown. This is the same car. The description was the same for Betty Gail Brown. So he had called and he got backup to come in, and they were looking at the case as well, or at the car and the crime scene as well.
Okay, so So I guess they got word that police were there looking for just the girls there at 4-Year Hall. Betty Gail, or not Betty Gail, but Quincy, Betty Gail's mother, went up there. Scratch that. Scratch.
Rewind.
Rewind. Okay. Okay, so Quincy was still looking for her daughter, and she pulled up to where 4-Year Hall is. She saw a lot of girls looking out the window. They kind of looked nervous, and I guess because they got word that a student was missing.
Right.
Not only that, but police was there and things like that. So she went up to the girls and said, "Have you seen her? Do you know anything?" And they's like, "No, she left at midnight. Haven't seen her." So she goes back to her car, and when she goes back to her car, she sees another police officer pulling up. Well, when that police officer pulled up, she goes up to there and said, "Have you heard anything? Do you know where she's at? Has any news come across? You know, I'm still, you know, I'm sure that's why you're here. You're looking for my daughter." And that's when the police already got word that they found her.
Yeah.
So he told Quincy,
"Your daughter's dead."
"Yeah, we found her. Your daughter's dead." Now, at that time, it was said that I guess when they interviewed her, she said that she was really quiet. She didn't really have any emotions coming out, but she said deep down inside she had those emotions, but those emotions she kept in track. And then the police said, "Well, I'll take you home." And he put her in the car. They drove home, and she was actually the one that had to break the news to Hargis.
Hargis, yeah.
And so the police stayed there, you know, until, you know, I guess long enough until they knew that they were okay. Not really okay, but just to know that they're okay to leave alone.
Right.
So they leave.
So back at the crime scene, they had saw they looked kind of like at the exterior part of the car just to see if there's anything on the car that they can see. Around the crime scene, they did find a woman's watch around the crime scene. At that moment, they were looking inside the car as well. They had found Betty Gail Brown in the driver's seat. Like I said earlier, she had her top was buttoned down.
And just a couple buttons.
Yeah, just a couple of buttons. And then her bra was broken, and it was around her neck. They also had found just like...
now, on her bra, they said, and this is what I read, that the straps were broken and that the hooks in the back were stretched out like it was pulled. So at first they were thinking that this could have been some type of sexual assault.
Right.
The way, you know, with the bra around her neck, but then when they got in there, when they were able to actually look into it,
there's no way.
None of her clothes were messed up. There's only just 2 buttons that was unbuttoned, so none of her clothes were messed up like there's been any type of sexual advancement towards her. And,
right.
And also to let you know, when they found her, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning on October 27th, 1961. Yeah.
Also, while looking at the crime scene inside the vehicle, they had noticed, like on the passenger side, there was a logo of her car on the passenger side, so it had written out, and there was blood around that. She also had she had hit her head, I guess, so hard that she had the logo on her forehead.
And she still had blood coming from her forehead.
Yeah. So there was blood in there. They also had, she just had like she just had like regular stuff in her car, obviously.
She had her school books sitting in her car, all her school books and paper or whatever sitting on there. Her purse was in the back seat.
Right. Nothing taken out of it, so they ruled out robbery as well.
They did find her car keys in the back behind the
floorboard.
driver's side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they found her car keys back there too.
So after they had looked at the scene, the coroner was called. The coroner got there. They had noticed bruises, scratches around Betty Gail's neck.
And the gash on her forehead. And
Yeah.
he pretty much ruled that her death was probably caused by strangulation. But he couldn't be 100% sure until they do the autopsy. So at that time, they took her to do the autopsy. And then they took her car to the police station so they can investigate the car a little bit further. Now, during the time of the autopsy, they did find, which I thought it was strange, but it wasn't really brought up a whole lot, but they did find some bruises and scratches in other areas, like on her arm and on her back. But they really didn't say a whole lot about that. They just mainly said most of the bruising was around her neck. Most of it was around the neck, and then, that is how she died. And they said that they determined the time to be about 1 to 1:15 in the morning that she died. And then with the car, when they took it to the station, they did look further in the car. They did dust for fingerprints. They found a bunch of smudges and everything, but they did come across 3 good fingerprints.
Right.
So then they were going to go back to the university, and really they got a bunch of police officers there to run. They were going to try to fingerprint everybody to come up with a match.
Right. So that next day, with it being like kind of a smaller town, it was all over the place. Everybody was talking about every little detail about it. They actually posted a newspaper article. They had a picture of Betty Gail Brown in the car still on the front page of the newspaper.
Lexington Herald, actually.
Yeah, it was. And they have put every little detail that they had found in there. Anything that has come about as of that moment was in the newspaper. So anybody that read it could have every little detail that went on in that crime. So
at that time, again, they were trying to fingerprint everybody that was there at Transylvania University. So far, there has been no matches. And then Charles Risden, you remember at the beginning of the story, when we talked about Charles Risden that
the friend,
saw him. Yeah. So he actually came into the police department and basically was like, look, I think I was the last person to see her.
Right.
So he explained that he actually was on a date and he just dropped her off from the date, and that he was on a date and he dropped her off, and he was on his way going back to his dormitory when he saw Betty Gail Brown. So he pulled up, he was chit-chatting with her. She was talking about the big exam that she was going to have the next day. And then after that, he left. Of course, like we said at the beginning,
he explained everything.
Yeah, she followed. She was behind him, and he turned into the parking lot, and she went on like she was going towards home. He said that he went to his dormitory, he talked to his roommate, he hung out for a little bit, and then he went to bed. So they did say that he was kind of nervous the whole time he was talking, but he did agree to a lie detector test. They gave him one, and he passed the lie detector test.
Right.
So they cleared him as a suspect. There was also a gentleman that come forward that delivers newspapers. Well, he wanted to bring up that about a few weeks before Betty Gail Brown was killed, he was delivering newspapers about 3 o'clock in the morning or so, right in that area. He said that he saw a guy that was underneath like a tree, and he said he saw a small car that was similar to Betty Gail Brown's car, and this car went by where that guy was at underneath the tree, and he said that he heard the guy yell, Betty. So the car come to a stop. The guy comes up to the window, chit-chatting. He gets in the car, And he said that they actually head towards Morrison Hall at that time. So there was that. They did bring in the guy that works with him, because he was in the vehicle as well, and he told them the exact same thing that happened. So they had reports on that, and then they also had a report from a waitress that she saw Betty Gail Brown come in there about 12:30ish. She was with another woman there, and explained what she was wearing and things like that. And she said they left. And the weird thing about it, I don't know if you heard this or not, but they actually took that waitress and showed her the Betty Gail Brown's body before it was buried to see if she recognized her. So
No, I didn't know that.
showed her the body. She's like, yes, that's her. And they actually had her come to Betty Gail Brown's funeral and burial to see if
She saw the woman.
saw the other woman. And then they also had her go through like the yearbooks and stuff to see if she recognizes anybody or who could the other woman be, and didn't recognize anybody. So, and they kind of was like, I don't know. But then there was also another restaurant that said, or no, let me go back to this first restaurant. There was friends of Betty Gail Brown's that was at that restaurant about 1 o'clock and said that she wasn't there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, said Betty Gail wasn't there. We know her. We're good friends with her. We were there from 12 to like 1:30, and she wasn't there at the restaurant. So, see?
I didn't know that.
So then there was another restaurant that said that she was there at this other restaurant, and that she was there with a guy. But no other leads come out of that either. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah,
So,
it is strange.
yes. So, there was also, I kind of go towards like maybe something may not be quite right with the parents. To me, it just seems weird where Quincy goes up to the university and is like searching the whole university, but not ever going up the driveway to Morrison Hall. She went to all the other driveways, but she did not go up that driveway to Morrison Hall the whole time.
Yeah.
All 3 times that she went up there to search, she did not go up there. I had a friend of mine say, well, you don't know how you would react, you know. And then they also say, which kind of makes me think too, you know, sometimes, you know, you got divine intervention. So maybe God didn't want her to go down that street.
Right.
Maybe there was a reason keeping her go down. Maybe she would have come up on it and got killed herself. So I know that could happen. And then another friend of mine said, yeah, the mother did it.
Well,
So,
I don't know.
Your thoughts?
I just have mixed feelings about it because, like, before they were saying a lot of times, like, a lot of things came out saying that the mother did do it. And they're like, that's wrong. Like, that's so bad for you to think that. But then, like, all the evidence, like, where she left at midnight and came back before 1 or whatever. And then she left again. Well, she left, I think, midnight and then again at, like, 12:45. Came back after the time that Betty Gail was killed, and then went out again. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't, why would you go, I don't know.
Another thing, too, that makes me question it is that if she was so close to her mother, she would have called her mother and say, hey, look, I'm staying after hours.
Right.
And it's not going to be till about 12:30 I'm going to come home. You would think I mean, because they went on and on and on and saying that they were just extremely close.
Right.
But to me, if they were that close, I mean, that's what you done. I mean, anytime you were late, you would call me and say, hey, I'm going to be late.
Right.
So you would think that she would have called and
Said
said I was going to be
something,
late. But apparently that was not said, that she was called.
So other suspects that they have, there was actually a maintenance guy. He was a janitor, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. A janitor at Transylvania. Right after the incident had happened, he just got up and he left. He went to Atlanta. He had a family in Atlanta. So he just left and went there. They actually questioned him. He did a polygraph, didn't he?
No. So they actually went out there to question him about why he all of a sudden left. And he was like, he said, I know it looks kind of strange leaving, right after she died, but I just wasn't getting any help, and I was working long shifts, and I kept asking him, and I left him a letter and left. And he's like, now if you want me to, I can come down there and take a lie detector test.
Oh, because then they were like, no, since you
okay.
agreed to it, that's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah. And they said, you're good. We won't count you as a suspect anymore. So they left. Another guy was, I don't know if you knew about this, but there was another student there too that left right after she died, and he left to Michigan. He just quit school, left to go to Michigan. And so they went up there to question him too. And I think they said that his parents said that he was there during the time that she died, and he was like, well, I can take a lie detector test. No.
You're good.
You're good. So to me, I guess anybody that mentioned about, hey, I'll take a lie detector, I mean, they pretty much thought, okay, yeah, well, they're innocent, because why would they want to take a lie detector test?
Yeah. So another suspect they may have had is a random hitchhiker. He was just on the side of the road. The cops went up to him, and he was just randomly like, oh, are you going to question me about that Betty Gail Brown murder? And they were like, what? They're like, that's random. So, yeah, now we're going to. So they took him in. They questioned him. He actually they had found out that he was at a homeless shelter at that time from like 10 o'clock until the next day.
And they actually locked the doors.
Yeah, so they locked the doors. They have proof that he was there. So there was no way he could have gotten out to do that. But it was just strange that he was like, oh, are you going to question me about that? Because, Yeah. But, so they did interview, like we said earlier, she did go on several dates, dated around. She didn't really have a steady boyfriend, but she did go out on dates. So they did interview some boys that she went out with, and there was one that was a UK football player that she did see a few times, and they interviewed him, and apparently there was no leads to show that they were actual suspects. Right.
So anyways, it was just an ongoing case. It was just ongoing. Nothing was coming up. There was not a motive. They didn't have anybody that they could think of. Now, to go back to the 3 fingerprints that they did find, it ended up being, one was the father's, one was the mother's, and one was the maintenance guy that did work on her car earlier that
morning.
Day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and that was it. So, I mean, there's just nothing there. And so they ended up just struggling to try to find something. So about a year passed, and they got a call from a police station up in New York. Well, there was a guy there that was sitting on the side of the road. He was dressed in women's clothing. and they arrested him for public intoxication.
Right.
When they did arrest him, they did find newspaper clippings of Betty Gail Brown. And again, the newspaper printed out everything about this case.
Right.
But anyways.
And remember, this was a year later, so he
Yeah, right.
had held on to these for a whole year.
And it was on him.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like it was in his apartment.
Right.
It was on him.
Yeah.
So they took him in there. They called the detective Donald Ducksworth. And there was also another Detective Cravens, I think is his name. And they called them, and they go up there, and they ask him. They're like, "Why do you have these articles?" And he's like, "Oh, someone mailed one of my friends that I went to school with. He mailed them to me." Well, why would he do that?
And why do you still have him with you?
Right. So, but nothing really anymore went from that. I don't know what happened with that, because to me that would just seem strange.
Right.
But I do know that they interviewed him, and I'm pretty sure he mentioned about taking a lie detector test. And they were like,
So then
no.
at that point, they're like, oh, you're good.
Yeah. And then they did talk to the friend that actually sent the articles to him, and he was like, yeah, we're just friends. He was like, well, when was the last time you talked to him? Well, when we graduated. I mean, none of it just made sense.
Right.
So it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of shady. I don't know. It's kind of iffy there.
It is. So they couldn't find anything. Years went on. They still could not find anything at all.
And basically turned into a cold case.
Yeah. Until one day, a guy named Alex Arnold, he was in jail currently, wasn't he?
In Oregon.
In Oregon.
For public intoxication.
Right. He was going to kill himself, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So he was going to kill himself, and basically they said he went crazy because he was talking to like a toilet paper roll,
Right.
and talking to like a hole in a wall,
Yeah.
and saying that there's a machine that was reading minds. I mean, he was just really crazy. But I
Yeah.
think it was due to alcohol withdrawals because he's just constantly drinking.
Right.
So.
So he was like, I need to speak to somebody. I need to talk to the police. I need to tell them something. So they got people in there, and he was talking to them, and he pretty much confessed to, he was like, I killed Betty Gail Brown.
I'm 99% sure I
Yeah,
killed her.
99% sure. So they had called the police station there and told them, hey, we got this guy here. He's saying that he killed Betty Gail Brown. So one of the detectives there was going to go to Oregon to see him, but he had requested another detective to go with him as well. This other detective had known this man since he was growing up as a little boy. So,
And I believe he's arrested him several times,
Yeah.
too. You know, because he was just constantly drinking alcohol, public intoxication. It's basically his arrest record.
right. So they go to Oregon and they question him.
Basically what he says is that he was drinking that night. He was wandering around. He didn't really have a place to stay. So he was just wandering around, and he went to a park. He was
Trying to find somewhere to sleep.
Right. So he was going to try to sleep on a bench that I guess he normally sleeps at, but there was people there at that bench.
Right.
So he left, and he said that he went towards Transylvania University, and that there was a tree. He slept under the tree. He woke up, finished his bottle of wine, and started walking around, and then he comes up to a car that's parked at the university. He said where there was two girls making out or making
Right.
love.
And he was smoking, so he wanted to he was trying to find a lighter from somebody.
Right.
So he goes up to them. Apparently they were making out, two women in the car, goes up to them and was like, hey, you got a light? And they just started screaming at him, cussing at him, and they were like, we're not really for sure like what was actually said during that moment, but he was just like, okay, so he started walking on, and then they just kept cussing at him, yelling at him, or whatever. So then he turns around.
He comes up to the car and he reaches in, because I guess the windows were down. So he reaches in and takes the woman that was on the driver's side and smashes her head against the dashboard. Said at that time, the woman that was in the passenger side just took off and left.
Right.
So she took off running. And then he said that, okay, he's afraid now. So he said he got into the passenger side, and went from the passenger side, he crawled back into the back seat. And he said that there was a bra laying there. So he took her bra and wrapped the bra around her neck and put his knee into the back of the seat and was pulling on her because she was knocked out, they said. Or he said. And then he was pulling on her and was choking her, and he said that she didn't really fight. And then at that time, he goes and says that he pushes the buttons and locks the doors, or he gets out, pushes the button, locks the doors.
Right.
So.
Which inconsistencies there.
Yeah. So he says all this. The detectives are like, okay, so again, and they did say his rights, and he said, again, if you want a lawyer, you can have a lawyer. He's like, no, I need to get this off my chest. I need to tell my story. So again, they repeat that several times. Well, then they write out a confession and has him under sworn testimony sign this confession.
Right.
I'll let you know, the detectives are actually the one that wrote it down. And when they handed it to Alex, he didn't read it.
He just signed.
He just signed it. But they read it to him, but
right.
He just signed it. So keep that in mind, because that does play a big part into the trial. So all that happened. So he's like, okay, he confessed. So he sends them to transport them to Lexington, to the police department there. And so he went in front of the judge. The judge says that he needs an attorney. They got the best attorney for him, because with all the publicity of this case, he wanted to make sure that nothing can happen to where it could lead to showing that there was a mistrial or something wrong with this trial. So they got a good attorney. One of the attorneys there that was on the case was
Robert Lawson,
and he did write a book that's called Murder, Mystery, Mistrial, and it's actually about Betty
the whole
Gail Brown.
case.
So definitely read it. I read it. Great book. So yeah, check that out. It kind of makes you think about a few things. But so he was going to be on this case as well. So they actually went in there to talk to him and basically said, okay, what's going on? Well, a couple things that they brought up is that, A, he didn't have a lawyer present. Yeah, the cops did tell him, if you want a lawyer, you can have a lawyer. But he denied it. He didn't have a lawyer. There was not a lawyer present during the confession. Second of all is that he was going through withdrawals majorly. He was going, talking to toilet paper roll. So he was not right in the head. And then he was also basically telling people that, he was going to kill himself because they actually put him on a 24-hour watch during that time. So he's going through withdrawals and doing all that. Newspapers had everything about
the case.
From the watch found laying on the ground to the fingerprints to everything was in this newspaper. So that was in there. So all this was presented in the case. So they went to trial, and they had a jury, and the jury, if there's any if there's reasonable doubt, they can't find him guilty.
Right.
So they go through this trial, and the prosecution, all they have, the only thing that they have is the confession. That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah.
That's all the confession. I mean, they don't have fingerprints, they don't have witnesses, they don't have nothing. So all they got was a confession. During a break, during the trial, Alex actually asked Lawson, "Do you actually think I did this?" And Lawson was like, "I don't know."
Right.
I don't know, but here's what we got.
Yeah.
I don't know. So they go to trial. I think the trial only lasts like 7 days. And then the jury goes in there. Well, the jury, it's a hung jury. 7 that was actually going to acquit him, and 5 that was going to find him guilty. And they just couldn't get past that. So then there was a hung jury. And then, so, I mean, that's really it. I mean, he was found, it was a hung jury.
Mm-hmm.
They kept on talking about doing another trial. It kept on getting scheduled out, and then basically it was like, it's just too old. We're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, couple things though that I have questions about. So I brought up one about the phone call, like Betty Gail Brown, if she was close to her mom, that she would have called.
Right.
Another thing is about these lie detector tests. I mean,
I would give them out to everybody.
Right.
Like, okay, if you want to do one, let's come on
right.
in.
So I don't understand why. I mean, I know that sometimes they can't be used in court, and
Speaking of that, though, Betty Gail's mom did a lie detector test, and she was inconsistent on some of the questions, but they said, or she had mentioned that she was just really nervous, like didn't know like what they were gonna ask, and
distraught.
But yeah,
yeah.
But I've never had a lie detector test, so I don't know how they work, but I don't know.
I don't know either. But I mean, to me, if they suggest to take a lie detector test, give them lie detector
Oh yeah,
test.
yeah,
So.
definitely.
Oh, another thing too is really, I kind of quit. Even though he passed the lie detector test and all that, I kind of question that Charles Risden too, because
Oh yeah, definitely.
he was the last one to see her, so I don't know.
There are a lot of different, because like Charles, like the people that had left right after it happened, why there was blood on the dashboard if she was in the driver's seat, like, but I know that Alex Arnold said he took her and put her into, like, smashed her face into the dashboard.
But that's awful. I mean, that's odd to do it, like, diagonal.
Like, let me just push you across the car instead of on the steering wheel.
Right.
Like,
that's weird.
I don't know.
Another thing, too, is that if there was a woman with her and when this attack happened, she just abruptly took off and left.
Right.
Where's her stuff?
Yeah.
She wouldn't have time.
And why not call, if you didn't have anything to do with it, why not call somebody and be like, hey, my friend there's something going on. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing, too. It was brought up that they did bring up her diary to see if there was anything mentioned about being interested in women. Nothing was brought up in her diary. And it was also, I forgot to mention that when they did the autopsy, they did find out that she was on her period, and that probably, a lot of times when she was on her period, she would not wear a bra because of sensitivity.
Right. So she may have just taken it off and thrown it in a bag.
Right. But this is kind of TMI, but if you're a woman, you're on your period, you're not going to be able to make out with a woman because there's not a whole lot you can do.
Right.
I mean,
especially being with a woman. Yeah.
I'm just saying. So I don't know. So that is TMI, but that kind of got me questioning.
Yeah.
About
and didn't the
that
autopsy say that she like had a tampon in and stuff too? Anyway.
Yeah.
So
there's that. Another question about the whole the two women in there, is that back in the 60s, I would think that during that time that it was kind of hush-hush to be a lesbian. So I would think that they would not be parked in a public
Right.
parking lot or driveway in front of a building. So anyways, but yes, so that kind of is questionable too. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all
Yeah.
that we have.
So many different things, like so many things come into play, like what happened here, or why did they do this, or just different. I don't know if we'll ever know what happened.
Yeah. So, hope you liked our first episode here. And, if you got any comments, what do you think? Just let us know what you think about it. What are your questions about it? Is there anything that
pops out
to you that we mentioned? If you happen to research it, is there anything that you've researched and say, hey, what about this?
Right.
So just leave us a comment, subscribe,
Mm-hmm.
and then read the book. The book was really good.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
like we had mentioned at the beginning of the video, we said that we were going to do like a crime mystery or something that happens in each state. So at the end of each video that we have, we're going to draw a state out of this bowl here, and we will research a crime that happened in that state, and that's
or case, or mystery, or weirdness, or whatever.
And that is going to be our next video. So,
and then also, where we're going to let you know which state we pick, of course. So if something pops up to something in that state that you're curious about, just leave a comment, and we'll mention you in our video.
Absolutely.
And do the research on that. So if you all have any suggestions, just let us know. So here we go. We're going to draw, and we'll see
Am I drawing first?
It's up to you.
Let me make sure I got one. Oh, the one that I can't hardly say.
Oh,
Massachusetts.
So Massachusetts. So if you know anything that happened in Massachusetts that you want us to talk about, let us know. If not, we're going to research, and we're going to throw a topic out there and tune into our next video.
Yeah.
And please subscribe, comment, like,
share it.
I mean, come on now. If you all enjoyed, stay safe out there, and yeah, I guess that's it.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.